Have you ever told yourself, "I need to let this go," only to find yourself thinking about it again the very next day? Maybe it's a relationship that ended years ago. Yet somehow, your heart still returns to that person. Maybe it's something you said. Something you wish you had never done. Or something you wish you had done differently. No matter how hard you try, the memory keeps coming back. You replay the conversation. You imagine different endings. You wonder if one small decision could have changed everything. And perhaps the hardest part is this. You already know holding on is hurting you. You know it steals your peace. You know it keeps you awake at night. You know it makes it difficult to enjoy the people and moments still in front of you. Yet somehow, you cannot let go. If you've ever felt frustrated with yourself because you couldn't move on, please know this. You are not weak. You are not broken. And you are certainly not alone. Millions of people quietly carry memories they cannot release. Grief they cannot explain. Or regrets they cannot forgive. But what if letting go is not about forgetting? What if inner freedom has nothing to do with forcing painful memories to disappear? More than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha discovered something remarkable about why the human mind clings to suffering. And once you understand it, you may stop fighting yourself. And begin finding the peace you've been searching for all along. There is a quiet kind of suffering that few people ever talk about. It doesn't leave bruises. It doesn't make headlines. Most of the time, no one around you even knows it's there. Yet it follows you into ordinary moments. You can be driving to work, washing the dishes, standing in line for coffee, or lying in bed after a long day. And suddenly, without warning, your mind takes you back. Back to a conversation you wish had ended differently. Back to the person you thought would always stay. Back to the opportunity you lost. Back to the mistake you still can't forgive yourself for. It's strange, isn't it? Life keeps moving forward. But a part of you feels like it's still living somewhere in the past. You tell yourself that you should move on. Friends encourage you to look ahead. People say, everything happens for a reason. But those words often feel empty. Because if letting go were that simple, you would have done it already. Maybe you've even become frustrated with yourself. You wonder why you're still thinking about someone who left years ago. Why one painful memory still has the power to ruin an otherwise peaceful day. Why a single regret keeps replaying in your mind, even after you've apologized, learned your lesson, and tried your best to move forward. And then another thought quietly appears. What's wrong with me? That question can hurt even more than the memory itself. Because little by little, you stop fighting the past. And start fighting yourself. You criticize your own heart for being too sensitive. You become impatient with your own healing. You compare yourself to people who seem to recover more quickly. You wonder why everyone else appears to be moving on while you still feel stuck. But here's something many people never say out loud. Healing is not a race. Pain does not follow a schedule. The heart does not work like a machine. You cannot simply press a button and erase love. You cannot command grief to disappear. You cannot force trust to return after it has been broken. Perhaps you've noticed that the harder you try not to think about something, the more it seems to occupy your mind. It's like trying not to hear a sound in a silent room. Or trying not to notice a single drop of rain on a window. The more you resist it, the more present it becomes. Maybe that's why you feel exhausted. Not only because of what happened, but because you've spent so much energy trying to escape what happened. Think about how many quiet battles you've fought that no one else has seen. The nights you couldn't sleep because your mind wouldn't stop replaying the past. The mornings you smiled at coworkers while carrying a heaviness no one could recognize. The family gatherings where you laughed at the right moments. yet silently wondered why your heart still felt incomplete. There are people all around us carrying invisible stories. The father who still blames himself for not spending enough time with his child. The woman who still hears the last words of someone she lost. The young man who keeps asking himself whether one different decision could have saved his relationship. The older woman who wonders if it's too late to begin again. Different stories. The same quiet pain. Holding on doesn't always happen because we want to suffer. Sometimes we hold on because we're afraid. Afraid that letting go means forgetting. Afraid that moving forward means betraying someone we loved. Afraid that releasing our regret means pretending it never mattered. Sometimes we cling to pain because it feels like the last connection we still have. If I stop grieving, does that mean I love them less? If I forgive myself, does that mean what happened wasn't important? If I let go of the past, who will I become? These are deeply human questions. Questions that rarely have simple answers. And perhaps that is why so many people remain trapped between two worlds. Unable to return to yesterday, yet unable to fully step into today. They continue carrying memories like stones in their pockets. Not because they enjoy the weight, but because they've forgotten what it feels like to walk without it. If any of this feels familiar, please don't mistake your struggle for weakness. Your heart is not holding on because it wants to suffer. It is holding on because it is searching for safety, for meaning, for something it fears losing forever. But what if the very thing you're trying so desperately to hold is not what your heart truly needs? What if freedom doesn't begin by forcing yourself to forget, but by understanding why you've been holding on all this time? Perhaps before we learn how to let go, we first need to discover what it is we're really afraid of losing. What if the hardest part of letting go is not losing what happened? What if it's losing the story you've been telling yourself about it? Take a moment and think about that. When something painful happens, the event itself eventually comes to an end. A relationship ends. A loved one passes away. A dream falls apart. A door closes. The moment is over. But in our minds, it continues. Not because time has stopped, but because we keep returning to it. Again and again. We replay the same conversation. We imagine different choices. We rewrite the ending 1,000 different ways. As if one more thought might somehow change what has already happened. It's a little like standing at the edge of the ocean, trying to pull back a wave that has already reached the shore. No matter how desperately you reach for it, the water keeps moving. Not because the ocean is cruel, but because that is its nature. Life is much the same. It keeps flowing. And yet, so often, we ask it to stand still. We ask people not to change. We ask time not to move. We ask yesterday to become today again. And when life cannot give us what it was never able to give, our hearts become exhausted. Perhaps this is why holding on feels so painful. Not because you loved too deeply, but because part of you is still asking life to return something that only exists in memory. Imagine carrying an old suitcase everywhere you go. At first, it makes sense. Inside are precious memories. Moments that shaped your life. People you loved. Dreams you once believed in. You carry it because it feels important. Because you don't want to lose what it represents. But years pass. The suitcase grows heavier. Not because the memories have changed, but because you've never allowed yourself to set it down. One day, someone asks, "Why are you carrying that?" And for the first time, you realize you've forgotten that putting it down was ever an option. Many of us live this way. We mistake holding on for honoring the past. We believe that if we release our pain, we are somehow betraying the people, the dreams, or the moments that mattered most. But think about someone you have loved deeply. If they truly wanted peace for you, would they ask you to spend the rest of your life trapped in yesterday? Or would they hope that one day, you could smile again? Maybe the greatest act of love is not carrying pain forever. Maybe it is allowing love to remain, even after suffering begins to fade. Because love and pain are not the same thing. We often tie them together until they become impossible to separate. We begin to believe, if I stop hurting, I must be forgetting. But is that really true? Think of a beautiful song you haven't heard in years. You may not listen to it every day. You may not think about it every morning. Yet when it plays again, the warmth returns instantly. The meaning was never lost. It simply became part of you. Perhaps love is like that. Perhaps the people who changed your life, the lessons you learned, the moments that shaped your heart, do not disappear simply because you choose to stop suffering. Maybe what you're truly afraid of isn't forgetting the past. Maybe you're afraid of discovering who you are without the pain you've carried for so long. Because pain can quietly become part of our identity. We stop saying, I experienced heartbreak, and begin believing, I am broken. We stop saying, I made a mistake, and begin believing, I am a failure. Without noticing, our suffering becomes the lens through which we see ourselves. But what if that lens isn't telling the whole story? What if beneath all the regret, grief, and disappointment, there is still a part of you that has never been damaged? A part of you that is still capable of loving, still capable of trusting, still capable of finding peace. For thousands of years, people have struggled with this same question. How do we release what keeps pulling us back? How do we remember with love, without living in chains? One man devoted his life to understanding exactly that. He looked directly at the human tendency to cling, not with judgment, but with profound compassion. And what he discovered was both simple and deeply transformative. Because true freedom does not begin when the past disappears. It begins when we finally understand why we have been holding on in the first place. And that is where the Buddha's wisdom gently begins to unfold. When the Buddha looked at human suffering, he did not begin by asking, what happened to this person? Instead, he asked something much deeper. What is the mind holding on to? At first, that question may seem surprising. After all, when we think about our pain, we usually focus on what happened. The relationship ended. The job was lost. Someone we loved passed away. A dream collapsed. Those events are real. They matter. The Buddha never denied that. But he gently invited people to look beneath the event itself. Because two people can experience the same loss, and yet carry it in completely different ways. One person may eventually find peace. Another may continue suffering for decades. The difference is not always what happened. Sometimes, the difference is what the mind refuses to release. Imagine standing beneath a tree in autumn. One by one, the leaves begin to fall. The tree does not fight the season. It does not cling to every leaf. It does not whisper, please don't leave. It simply allows nature to move. And because it lets go, new leaves are able to grow when spring arrives. Now imagine if that tree could hold on to every leaf forever. What would happen? The old leaves would wither. New life would have no room to appear. The very act of refusing change would prevent renewal. The Buddha observed that our minds often behave this way. We try to hold on to people, to moments, to identities, to expectations, Not because we are foolish, but because we are afraid. Afraid that if we let go, there will be nothing left. Yet what if the opposite is true? What if holding on is what leaves us empty? Think about the last time you held sand in your hand. If your palm was open, the sand rested there naturally. But if you squeezed your fist as tightly as possible, the grains began slipping through your fingers. The tighter you held, the more you lost. How often do we do the same thing with life? We cling to relationships so tightly that fear replaces love. We cling to success until peace disappears. We cling to youth until every wrinkle feels like a personal failure. We cling to certainty in a world that has never promised certainty. The Buddha saw that the problem was not love. The problem was our desperate need for life to stay exactly as we wanted it to be. There is a quiet but powerful difference between appreciating something and believing you cannot live without it. One brings gratitude. The other brings fear. And fear quietly becomes suffering. Perhaps this is why letting go feels impossible. Because deep inside, we believe we are being asked to give something up. But the Buddha's invitation was never to stop loving. It was to stop turning love into possession. To stop turning beautiful memories into prisons. To stop asking temporary moments to give us permanent security. Look closely at nature. The sun rises. And then it sets. The tide comes in. And then it goes out. Flowers bloom. And eventually they return to the earth. Nothing in nature apologizes for changing. Nothing resists its own impermanence. Only human beings spend so much of their lives wishing reality were different from what it is. We say, "I'll be happy when things go back to the way they were." But life quietly whispers, "There is no going back. There is only this moment. This breath. This opportunity to meet life as it is." That may sound frightening at first. But hidden inside that truth is an incredible freedom. Because if life is always changing, then your pain is changing too. The grief that feels unbearable today will not always feel exactly the same. The heartbreak that fills every corner of your mind will not remain unchanged forever. Not because you force it away, but because change is the nature of all things. The Buddha did not ask people to believe this simply because he said so. He asked them to observe their own lives. Think about every season you've already survived. There were days you believed you would never smile again. Moments when you thought the weight on your heart would never become lighter. Yet here you are. Still breathing. Still growing. Still searching. Not because life has been easy, but because something within you has quietly continued moving forward. Perhaps that quiet strength has been with you all along. Hidden beneath the fear. Hidden beneath the grief. Hidden beneath the stories you've told yourself about who you are. The Buddha believed that peace does not appear when life finally becomes perfect. Peace begins the moment we stop demanding that life remain unchanged. And once we begin to understand this, letting go no longer feels like losing something precious. It begins to feel like opening our hand after holding a heavy weight for far too long. Not because the weight never mattered, but because we finally realize we were never meant to carry it forever. Perhaps the most beautiful part of the Buddha's teaching is this. He never asked people to become someone else. He simply invited them to see more clearly. Because when we truly see, our relationship with suffering begins to change. Imagine that you are standing beside a quiet lake. The water is perfectly still. You can see the sky reflected on its surface. You can see the trees, the clouds, even your own reflection. But then a strong wind begins to blow. The water becomes restless. The surface breaks into endless ripples. Suddenly, nothing is clear anymore. Did the sky disappear? No. Did the trees vanish? No. The only thing that changed was the movement of the water. The Buddha believed that our minds are often like this lake. When we are overwhelmed by fear, regret, anger, or attachment, we begin to see life through restless water. We believe every frightening thought. We mistake every painful emotion for permanent truth. We become convinced that because we feel lost, we are lost. But feelings are like the wind. They arrive. They stay for a while. And eventually, they move on. This is something we often forget. When joy comes, we know it won't last forever. Yet when sadness comes, we somehow believe it will stay forever. But life has never worked that way. Every emotion changes. Every season changes. Every chapter changes. The Buddha wasn't asking us to stop feeling. He was inviting us to stop building our identity around temporary experiences. There is a profound difference between saying, "I feel sadness," and saying, "I am a sad person." There is a difference between, "I experienced failure," and, "I am a failure." One describes a passing moment. The other becomes a prison. Many people unknowingly spend years living inside prisons built by their own thoughts. Not because they choose to, but because they never realized the door was never locked. Imagine walking through your home carrying a candle. The room is dark. The flame is small. But it is enough. It doesn't remove every shadow. It doesn't illuminate the entire house. Yet with each step, you see just enough to continue. The Buddha's wisdom is much like that candle. It doesn't promise a life without pain. It doesn't promise that people will never leave, that your heart will never break, or that every dream will come true. Instead, it gives you something far more valuable. A way to walk through darkness without becoming darkness yourself. Think about how different life would feel if you no longer believed every painful thought that entered your mind. If you could watch regret appear, without allowing it to define your future. If you could remember someone you loved, without believing you had to keep suffering to honor them. If you could say, "That chapter shaped me, but it does not imprison me." Perhaps this is what true freedom really means. Not escaping life. Not escaping emotions. But no longer allowing every passing experience to decide who you are. The Buddha once compared attachment to holding a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. Before it ever reaches another person, it burns the hand that holds it. How often do we carry resentment in exactly this way? How often do we replay an old betrayal, thinking we are protecting ourselves, while all the time, we are the ones being wounded? There comes a quiet moment in every healing journey, when we realize something unexpected. We are not releasing the past because it deserves forgiveness. We are releasing it because our own heart deserves peace. That realization changes everything. Because now, letting go is no longer an act of loss. It becomes an act of compassion. Compassion for the tired mind that has carried too much for too long. Compassion for the heart that has been asking for rest. Compassion for yourself. And perhaps, that is where inner freedom quietly begins. Not on the day your memories disappear. Not on the day life finally becomes fair. But on the day you stop asking your past to give you a future it was never meant to provide. As you sit here listening today, I invite you to ask yourself one simple question. What am I still carrying? That my heart has been gently asking me to set down. Don't rush to answer. Just let the question rest within you. Sometimes, the beginning of healing isn't found in finding the perfect answer. Sometimes, it begins the moment we become willing to ask a different question. And perhaps, that willingness is the first true step toward the inner freedom the Buddha discovered so many centuries ago. If you've been carrying something heavy for a long time, I want you to know something. You don't have to force yourself to let go today. In fact, the harder we force the heart, the tighter it often holds on. Perhaps healing begins in a much gentler way. Not by asking, "How do I stop thinking about the past?" but by asking, "Can I stop fighting myself for having a past?" There is an important difference. So many people believe they have failed because they still remember. Because certain songs still bring tears. Because a familiar place still reminds them of someone they loved. Because a date on the calendar still carries an ache. But memories are not the problem. The human heart was never designed to erase what mattered. It was designed to transform it. Think about an old photograph. Over the years, the colors begin to fade. The edges become worn. Yet its meaning often becomes even more precious. Not because you live inside that photograph, but because it reminds you of a chapter that helped shape who you are. Your memories can become like that. They don't have to disappear. They don't have to control you. They can simply become part of your story. One chapter among many. Not the entire book. The Buddha often encouraged people to return to the present moment. Not because the past has no value, but because life can only be lived here. Right now. This breath. This heartbeat. This moment. Notice what happens when you take one slow, gentle breath. Nothing in your past changes. Nothing in the outside world changes. And yet, something inside becomes just a little quieter. That quiet space is important. Because in that space, you begin to realize that you are more than your thoughts. You are more than your regrets. You are more than the story your mind keeps repeating. Imagine sitting beside a river. Leaves fall from the trees and land on the surface of the water. Some leaves move quickly. Others drift more slowly. But none of them stay forever. Now imagine placing each painful thought on one of those leaves. The regret. The guilt. The anger. The disappointment. The longing. You don't push the leaves away. You don't chase after them. You simply watch as the current carries them onward. This doesn't mean you no longer care. It means you no longer need to hold every thought in your hands. There is great peace in discovering that not every thought deserves your attention. Not every memory needs another replay. Not every question requires an answer today. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop demanding certainty from a life that has always been changing. And perhaps tonight, before you go to sleep, place one hand gently over your heart. Take a slow breath. Then quietly say to yourself, "I don't have to carry everything anymore. I can love without clinging. I can remember without suffering. I can honor my past, while still giving myself permission to live fully today." Healing rarely arrives all at once. It comes in quiet moments. In softer thoughts. In gentler breaths. In choosing, again and again, not to abandon yourself. One day, you may look back and realize something extraordinary. The memory is still there. The love is still there. But the pain no longer owns your heart. And that is not because you forgot. It is because, little by little, you learned the beautiful difference between holding on to love and holding on to suffering. Before we end today, I want to leave you with one simple thought. The fact that you're here, listening to these words, may already mean that a part of your heart is ready to heal. Not because you've forgotten what happened. Not because the pain was never real. But because something within you is quietly searching for peace instead of more suffering. And perhaps that is one of the bravest choices a person can make. If you've been carrying a burden that no one else can see, I hope you'll remember this. You don't have to carry it alone forever. You don't have to become a prisoner of yesterday. Your past may have shaped you, but it does not have to define you. The Buddha reminded us that every new moment is an opportunity to begin again. Not by becoming a different person, but by meeting ourselves with a little more wisdom, a little more patience, and a little more compassion. So today, instead of asking yourself, "Why can't I let go?" perhaps ask a different question. What small act of kindness can I offer myself today? Sometimes, healing doesn't begin with a giant breakthrough. Sometimes, it begins with one peaceful breath. One gentle thought. One decision to stop fighting your own heart. And from those small moments, a new life slowly begins to grow. If this message spoke to your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Share one word in the comments that describes what you're ready to let go of. It could be fear, regret, anger, guilt, or simply pain. Your one word might become the encouragement someone else needs today. And if these teachings have brought you even a little comfort, I invite you to join our growing community by subscribing to the channel. Each week, we explore timeless Buddhist wisdom in a simple, compassionate way, not to escape life's challenges, but to find peace within them. If you know someone who is struggling to move on, consider sharing this video with them. Sometimes, a single message arrives at exactly the right moment. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until we meet again, may your mind become a little quieter. May your heart become a little lighter. May you discover the freedom that has been within you all along. Take good care of yourself. And remember, you are never alone on the path to peace.